In tonight's viewer mail, we have an email from Oscar-winning director and screenwriter Barry Levinson, who writes, if this hearing was a fictional piece of material, it would be presented in a totally different manner. One of the Democratic players would ask this question: how is it possible that President Trump was looking into corruption in Ukraine? Suddenly, he is a crime fighter. Has the president ever tried to end corruption anywhere, at any time in his life? Over the years, he has been found guilty of stealing from his own charity. Also, the president has been found guilty of running a fake university and stealing money from people who believed in him. The president has paid off women because of his sexual aggressive behavior. Now, out of the blue, he wants to clean up corruption in Ukraine, not Russia, where Putin has killed off opposition players, poisoning them in far-off countries. President Trump has no real problem with the Saudi prince MBS having his butchers chop up a Washington Post reporter, not a real problem. Or Turkey's aggression against Kurds, not a big problem. But the Ukraine is corrupt. That needs to change. Are we supposed to believe this? Donald Trump wants to clean up corruption, starting with Biden's son in Ukraine? The Democrats have not yet emphasized this absurdity at the center of the Republican defense of Donald Trump. Might that moment come in the House Judiciary Committee impeachment hearings or in the impeachment trial in the United States Senate? We are joined now by one of the jurors in the possible impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump. If he is impeached by the House of Representatives, Senator Amy Klobuchar is a Democrat from Minnesota and member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. She is also a candidate for president of the United States. Senator, and it's because you're a candidate for president of the United States.
Yes, Lawrence.
That I believe you already have the strength, but have built up the strength to deal with the kind of frustration that Barry Levinson is feeling and people all over the country are feeling about this.
As a movie person, he knows that truth has become stranger than fiction. Yeah, so that is one thing.
He makes that point as he goes on in the email.
The second thing he has to remember is you can't, that long of a question would take up all your time. The third thing is I think that Adam Schiff was trying to focus and did a very good job of this on what was in front of him. And I think these arguments will be made later. But remember, this phase of this was gathering the evidence from career diplomats, career military. I just will never forget seeing Fiona Hill today. I saw snippets of it, of course, and just her stoic nature and the thought of her. My favorite story that I read today about her was when she was a little girl in school and some boy behind her set her pigtail on fire and she doused it out with her own hands. You know, there she was, and she was focused on what was before her. And that was what Russia did, what Ukraine didn't do. And as I learned from going to Ukraine twice now, and once with Senator McCain and Graham, I mean, Russia tried to influence, as we know, in a big way, Ukrainian elections. They put up a puppet, and not only that, they invaded their country and annexed Crimea. So this thought that it was Ukraine that was the bad actor is absurd, and I was really glad that she pointed it out. It's not to say they don't have problems in their country with corruption, but I loved how she explained today that for the president, corruption, in this case, was code word for going after getting dirt on Biden. You know,
I had a different introduction for this segment tonight until I got this email just minutes before the show. And what I thought it captured was the kind of viewer frustration that there is out there in watching this. And so just to clarify, we know that in a courtroom, that wouldn't be admissible. If Donald Trump was on trial for X, you couldn't bring up all these other things you know that are about his life. But this is a different arena. Will we hear something like that said, for example, in the Judiciary Committee when they're considering impeachment? Or could that be said, that kind of thing be said, in the Senate impeachment trial?
This is an example of evidence because of the fact that in this case, he was allegedly the corruption crime fighter. Yeah. And when you have other countries and other things that happen, including the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, he showed no care, really, about standing up to that. So that could be made relevant. I would think it would be. But I think, again, a lot of this is going to depend on what our Republican colleagues do. And this is their moment to decide, are they going to put their country first or not? What's your reaction to Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, and others having lunch with the president today? It disappoints me. It's not illegal or anything like that. I could see if they were going over there on a major issue, that of course would be fine. But instead, this is what's happening. And I just hope that they listen to the evidence and that they remember what this is really about. It's putting private interest, partisan interest in front of our countries.
We're going to squeeze in a break because I've heard you're running for president.
Really?
And we
had a debate last night.
And we had a little bit of a debate last night. We're going to talk about that when we come back after this break.
I think you've got to win. And I am the one, Mr. Vice President, that has been able to win every red and purple congressional district as the lead on a ticket every time. I govern both with my head and my heart. And if you think a woman can't beat Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi does it every single day.
That's presidential candidate Senator Amy Klobuchar. In fact, with us now, my rule is I don't usually show video of the person I'm going to cut to here. But
Understand.
But the Pelosi line was so good, okay? That's the line one. And it had not occurred to me that you are among the possible beneficiaries of the way the country is watching Nancy Pelosi work. Because there is a woman clearly, running circles around Donald Trump every day, has him tied up in knots. With
dignity.
Right, and I think showing very effectively, I didn't need the lesson. I didn't need this lesson, but for anyone who does need the lesson, of course, a woman nominee can run very strongly, very effectively against Donald Trump.
Exactly. And it's interesting that I made that point, but because I've run two races now where for my county attorney job and my Senate job, where I was the first woman in the job, and it hasn't happened before.
Did you have to talk about it?
People would ask about it all the time. Can a woman win? Can a woman win? A woman's never win. And I would just always say, I'm running on my merits. I am proud to be a woman candidate. I'm running on my merits. But as you get to this level, the presidential, and you start hearing people say things like, you don't look presidential, I keep you reminded of Barbara Mikulski, who is always hilarious and is still a strong, strong person, who was the dean of the Women's Senators, who once said, someone said, well, I don't know if you look like a senator. And she said, this is what a senator looks like.
And so I wanted Barbara to make, was about this high.
Yes. So I wanted to make the point that given that we have had 45 presidents and they're all men, maybe we do have a higher standard. I believe I can meet that standard, but we need to dispel some thoughts here. You don't have to be the tallest person or the loudest person or the skinniest person. You just have to be able to do your job and do it well and have the back of the American people. And then finally, yes, Nancy Pelosi is the ultimate representation of that because she has been doing this a long time, and she's shown that one, experience matters. And she's shown her caucus that. She's someone that has bridged left to right in her own caucus. She's someone that brings people with her, and she has literally made her point to him with my favorite one was when she left that White House meeting and one flick of her sunglasses. Mm-hmm. She showed him what power was. Not to mention literally standing up to him in the cabinet room, exactly. in that shot that we can never forget. Mm-hmm. And that was a demonstration, I think, it's so symbolic, so powerful. In last night's debate, there was kind of a forgotten kind of ghost outside the building called the United States Congress. But this is true of all presidential debates. Mm-hmm. The candidates always talk about what they're going to do as if there is no Congress, as if there's no House of Representatives, none of that. And so what do you think is a realistic set of proposals that you could handle if the Democrats, let's grant the Democrats a possible majority in the Senate. It wouldn't be an overwhelming majority. There's no math that gets you to that. What becomes reasonable at that point? So, first of all, I think you can't divorce yourselves from Congress. And I've been the one making that point, that we can't just eke by a victory for a new president at 4 a.m. when one state comes in. We can't just win. We have to win big. Because if you truly want to get these big things done on immigration reform and climate change and health care, we can't just eke by a win. And that's one of my major arguments, that I bring in those states and I will bring in the suburban districts and the rural. And then once we've done that, oh yes, you've got to do some things immediately. And that's why I put out a 100-day plan. FDR did that in the middle of an economic crisis. We're in a trust crisis. And when you look at what just happened in Kentucky and Virginia, where we brought in voters, independents, moderate Republicans, that's how you build that coalition. So you immediately make change with climate change, immigration reform, health care, and economic issues, and get it done.
We're out of time. That seat's always there for you whenever
Thank
you're
you,
in
Lawrence.
town. Senator Amy Klobuchar, candidate for President of the United States. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.